This is the Wally and Mathot Show, powered by Barrhaven Ford. Now here are your hosts, Brent Wallace and Mark Mathot.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Brent Wallace. He's Mark Mathot, who was doing Kucherov well before Kucherov was doing post-game press conferences. I thought for sure today, based on your London Knights calendar, you'd be tarps off, towel around the neck.
Yeah, and we joked about it. I don't, you know what? I think it's because it's early in the morning and it just feels wrong coming on your tarps off with a beer in my hand. It just doesn't seem right, especially when you're a dad and you have two kids upstairs waiting for you. So maybe at some point, but we're not right now. I'm
going to assume though, Nikita Kucherov is still tarps off, and it's no matter what time of the morning it is. Anyway, we'll get to him later in the show. This is episode 33 of the Wally and Mathot Show, powered by Barrhaven Ford. Head in today and check out their new Roush-inspired BFC custom builds on F-150s, Rangers, and Mustangs. Vehicles built the way you want them, and an extra helping of high performance kicked in. Stop in today. Check them out. BFC Customs, 555 Dealership Drive in Barrhaven. All right, the offseason now, Meth, officially underway as the Stanley Cup has been awarded. They got the expansion draft, the entry draft, free agency, the Brady Tkachuk signing day. I'm sure that'll be a special. And to talk about all those things, we have the Sens draft wizard himself on the show today. That's right. Trent Mann, the Sens chief amateur scout, joins us. So crack open a high tide, no matter what time of the day it is. And enjoy. Don't forget to use the Whitewater coupon code for 15% off your purchase when you go to shopwhitewater.ca. Later on the show, Meth, you have a bet to pay up on. We'll get to that, presented by Faces Magazine and Trivial Trivia, presented by Pizza Forno. But at first, as always, let's get to the headlines. Built by BEI, Bonnechere Excavating Inc., helping to shape the Ottawa Valley. Visit BonnechereExcavating.com. Number one, lightning strike. Tampa wins back-to-back ninth team in NHL history to win consecutive titles. Number two, Cooch goes off. Entertaining or disrespectful post-game presser. Meth, we'll get you to weigh in. Number three, Tarasenko. Vladimir Tarasenko requests trade out of St. Louis. 4, sensible offseason. What lies ahead for the Ottawa Senators? And 5, the match, that golf match. Was it entertaining, or did we do a better job of playing the match with Ian Mendes and Sean Simpson? But first, let's get to the lightning strike. This really was no surprise. At the end of the day, they come down to win back-to-back titles.
Yeah, and I want to say that it didn't disappoint, but I feel like it kind of did a little bit, only because I think, like most people, I wanted to see a competitive series. It doesn't really matter what the outcome is of that series. I just wanted to see two teams battle. And of course, Montreal battled, but getting that one win isn't enough. And obviously Tampa takes it. And to do that in modern day NHL, Wally, of course, I know there's some contentious stuff going on as far as the cap goes, and that they were over the cap by almost $20 million. But to do that either way and win back-to-back Stanley Cups in modern day NHL is incredibly, incredibly impressive. And so we have to give them props for that. Vasilevsky, a monster back there as well. Where do they go from here? It'll be very interesting. I really do think it's going to be one of those situations in Tampa when the expansion draft rolls around that might be a little difficult for them. They're going to have to part ways with somebody pretty good. So I think, again, at the end, they don't really care about any of that right now. They just won their second cup in a row. Things are really good in Tampa. Sky's the limit for that team.
Okay, I got a couple of points here. One is you brought up Andre Vasilevsky. Let's just get to it right now. There was no mention before the handshake line that Andre Vasilevsky's equipment was too big. And now suddenly it's the biggest thing in the world. Can we just accept the fact that the NHL measures all of this gear and signs off on all of it? If you do not get it pre-approved, even the trainer gets fined, like their head equipment guy gets fined. I just want this to go away. Like this wasn't mentioned in the first round or the second round. It's just now.
Yeah, but and you're right, Wally, because there were quite a few comments about that on Twitter, on social media, with regards to his gear being too big. And I think it's all from that one shot where you could see him standing side to side with Carey Price, right? They're kind of looking at each other, and based off that angle, it just looks like he's got this, like, it looks like he's wearing this mountain of equipment on him, but he's also a really big guy, as you mentioned, Wally, and that it's league regulated. They check in on all this stuff and have to approve on it before the season starts. It's a poor excuse. I think people are kind of grasping at straws at this point. They're really leaning heavy on the 20 million over the cap. They're now they found this new flavor of the week, which would be Vasilevsky's pads. At some point, you just have to respect the fact that they won, and we got to move on.
Like, I know when you get good, people want to try and take you down so that, they always cheer for the underdog. But If you put me in net with Andre Vasilevsky's gear, I'm not going to win the Conn Smythe. Can we just give him a little bit of credit for winning the Conn Smythe and posting
he moves
4 shutouts? Like
exactly 4 shutouts. And I was going to say, he moves pretty darn well for a guy in oversized equipment. So again, I think we have to understand that he is that big of a human being, and he moves exceptionally well for his size. He's the best goaltender on the planet.
The whole again, we'll go back to that the salary cap circumvention, if you will. They still fit it under the rules. Like under the rules, it still works. So regardless if they did it or not, it's still under the league rules. So therefore, it is legit. So if you don't like the rule, you change it, but you can't get mad at Tampa for just doing exactly what the rule states. So this whole spirit of the law, letter of the law, it's a moot point to me. And it just bugs me that they're trying to find ways. Patrick Kane came back. Remember in the Cup final? I don't remember the outrage that there was for that. Now,
nobody's talking about previous examples. They're only leaning in on this Tampa Bay situation. So I agree with you.
And then you brought up the salary cap, which is the same thing about the Chicago Blackhawks back then, is they had to dump players the next year. And so we'll probably have to see that for Tampa this year. And John Cooper alluded to it in his post-game press conference, saying, we know this is a special group. We know that this is not going to be back. And so we want to savor it. You could tell there was a lot of that going on. It was like a nostalgic Stanley Cup, it felt like for me.
Agreed. Yeah. And you make a good point right there. And that kind of reinforces what I said earlier. A lot of these guys, this is how it works. And this is why teams get blown up. All these role players that are on those, third and fourth line guys, even on defense, they're all looking to get paid now, right? Stanley Cup champions back to back, they want to get paid. So there's no way that roster's staying intact. I think I don't believe that's a secret anymore. It's too bad for that fan base. They're still going to be a very competitive team, but missing a couple of those pieces is going to hurt them.
All right. Number 2, Cooch goes off. I can't help but laugh at this because it entertains me, but it's upset a lot of people. You aren't one of them, which I fully appreciate, I think, was it disrespectful because he took a shot and he didn't use Marc-Andre Fleury's name and he took a shot at Habs fans and I guess he wasn't dressed up and he wasn't sipping a martini. Like, was this out of line?
Well, it can be both entertaining and disrespectful at the same time, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. They aren't mutually exclusive in that sense. I think for me, I made it fairly known. It's the tweet is still catching like wildfire today. I think I was just speaking my mind. I was actually in the gym when I wrote that little post about Kucherov and how I felt like he's entitled to say what he wants. Montreal can say whatever they want. We all just need to move on. That's entertainment. And if, as a fan, I was entertained by that. It's not like he threw somebody's grandmother under the bus or anything like that. It was very simple. He was just, and maybe the little shot at Marc-Andre Fleury was a little disrespectful. I will agree with that 100%. But you got to remember that was about an hour after the game. He's dehydrated. He has probably pounded 6 to 8 Bud Lights at this point. He's feeling really good. And again, that doesn't necessarily excuse him, but I can understand where he's coming from. He was taking a bit of heat throughout the postseason. Yep. So that was his FU moment. You know what I mean? That was his moment to say, you know what? I'm going to give the finger to everybody that doubted us or that was ragging on me for coming in late. I was genuinely hurt. I was playing with a fractured rib there in those last games. I mean, it's nothing short of impressive. So we have to give them his props. Again, I can understand. Beyond, you know what? I'll rephrase this. The only people that are being negative are the Montreal fans, and understandably so. They're ticked off, right? But when I'm looking through all my mentions and people mostly, for the most part, arguing this point and Kucherov's stance and the way he handled that presser, they're all Habs fans. So, of course, they're going to be very loud. There's a ton of them out there, and I can understand their regret. But at the end of the day, this is an entertainment business, Wally. You know this. This is what we want. We don't want to see robotic interviews. No. We want to see personality. Bring it on. The NHL just got a heel for free in this situation, right? Now you've created a little bit of animosity with the Montreal Canadiens. You've got your heel. You've got more storylines for when they meet up next year. It's perfect for everybody. Everybody wins.
Montreal fans are too sensitive. And I'm going to say that because remember when Paul McLean went at Rafael Diaz and said they shouldn't have thrown the puck up to player 61. Well, I can't tell you the number of Montreal media during that series was like, that is so disrespectful. I can't believe he would say that just to call him player 61.
Yes.
Who cares?
I know. I'm agreeing. And it's funny because you make a good point in that. And I think a lot of the major fan bases are kind of like that, but I didn't even attack anybody in that tweet, right? I basically said Kucherov can say what he wants. Montreal can say whatever they want. And even that, I had some people with some pretty interesting replies, and some of them were pretty offensive and they were coming at me pretty good. But I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to let them have this moment because they're passionate and they're not happy. So be it.
If one of your teammates, if Erik Karlsson didn't win the Norris and he had 95 points and the next guy had 35 points, and I won't say it's that close, it's not that far apart between Vasilevsky and Fleury, but his reality is Vasilevsky should have won the Vezina, and he's defending his teammate. And while he doesn't say Marc-Andre Fleury's name, he may not have remembered it, which is quite possible at that moment with all the stuff that's going on and going into his body. So I just think that the whole workup over the Marc-Andre Fleury thing, while it can be taken as disrespectful because it's not in the middle of the afternoon and he's not in a shirt and tie, I think in that moment he may not have remembered his name. But I do think they fully believe that Andrei Vasilevsky should have been the Vezina Trophy winner. Vasilevsky, if I'm not mistaken, was the first team all-star and Marc-Andre Fleury wasn't. Like anyway. I know
it's weird to Wally. Yeah, I agree. And that's the weird issue. And it's tough because I don't want to be too firm in my stance with regards to the Vezina, only because those are two teams that we only really paid a lot of attention to in the postseason, right? I mean, we were watching a little throughout the year, but we barely watched any of those games because we were following the North. So it's hard to really kind of put my stamp of approval on it, but based off of the numbers and the way that Vasilevsky looked, it's hard to believe that he wasn't the best goaltender. I think if you asked anybody in the NHL, they would agree that he's the best goalie right now in the world. But maybe Marc-Andre Fleury had a little bit better and a little bit more consistent regular season, factored in that he's not playing on a Stanley Cup championship club, which really shouldn't matter. But I think all those things kind of play a factor in the decision-making when it comes to the Vezina.
But sure. But I'm just saying, like, you would defend Erik Karlsson that should have won the Norris Trophy is my point. Like Kucherov is defending.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. Right? Yeah, of course. I defend him. Yeah.
So he fully believes it. So I don't take that away from him.
Yeah. And I think especially after you win a championship like that, and you can finally just voice how you're feeling without really worrying about jinxing anything or affecting your team's play. This is their opportunity now to be like, okay, this is how I feel. I'm going to tell you guys. And I think, blah, 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 Erik Karlsson should have won versus so-and-so. And I for sure would have done that. So I guess I can relate in that aspect, but it's the shade, right? That's the issue right now. Isn't necessarily that. It's the shade by not addressing Marc-Andre Fleury's name, feeling the need to mention him in a presser after you've won the Stanley Cup. But you know what? He's filled with emotions. He's passionate in that moment. He's had a couple drinks. He's got a little liquid courage in him. So I can understand where he's coming from. And again, my original point trumps all of this. It's entertainment. He didn't say anything offensive. You know what I mean? It's entertainment.
I waited for 23 years for players to come out of that room and try to say something that was entertainment value, which is why we loved heels, or we just like guys who would say something, and everybody would gravitate to it. Yes. So I'm all for it. Like, I don't want the whole league to become F-bombs. I just would like guys to say what they think. Right.
And the F-bombs is something that I think that's also a language barrier thing with him, right? Like, I think if you have
I'm Patrick Maroon. Did you see Patrick Maroon? Like,
was it after the game?
Yeah. There was I watched the full hour of post game stuff.
Oh, I missed the Maroon interview. Okay.
I'm okay, right? Like, whatever. It's who cares? They
you know what? And Wally, it's funny because some people online were like, well, and this is what I always laugh at. Like, this one person, I can't remember who, in the comments was like, well, the NHL, they're role models, and my 9-year-old shouldn't be subjugated to watching this. And I'm thinking, like, why is your 9-year-old awake at midnight watching the post-game celebrations? Like, maybe your 9-year-old should be sleeping. And again, but like, that's just me. Like, when I was watching games as a kid, I wasn't staying up. Again, personal preference. I don't want to get too deep here and get attacked by a bunch of angry parents. I'm a parent too, so I can understand, but like, come on, let's go. Like, we're talking about athletes heated in the moment. They're going to swear.
Sure. But I will, but now here's a couple of points on that. And this is going to probably take the whole show. Is one, my kid, I'm going to say probably at 9, maybe 10, I would always allow him to stay up to watch the Stanley Cup celebration and to see the cup. Because he's a huge hockey guy.
I'm unfamiliar. So
you can have that day off. And it used to be a school night because it was back in June, and I would still let him do it. So you can, all the parent letters you can send to me.
So how would you feel? How would you feel then if, you're watching an interview and so-and-so drops a huge F-bomb and your son heard it? Would you address it in the room?
No. My second point was, regardless how much you try to shield your kids from this stuff, it's impossible in every day.
Oh, yeah.
If they're on any kind of social media,
do they have a cell phone?
Right.
They have a cell phone, right?
So while I understand and appreciate, we don't want our entire society just to be dropped into a whole bunch of garbage language, for lack of a better term. It's tough. It's pretty tough to get all that stuff out. There's live mics in every broadcast too. Like you can hear guys in the corner saying stuff. So let's not get all excited if you hear a word or two, because you know what? You can't shield them forever.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. Well said.
So speaking of sensible conversations, we go to number 3. I skipped one. Tarasenko. Vladimir Tarasenko is the latest star to want out. Now, I don't know if I blame him. The story is out in The Athletic by Jeremy Rutherford. Does a great job of detailing this. Vladimir Tarasenko has had 3 shoulder surgeries in 28 months. They didn't fix it in the first 2. You can read the whole story. So he wants out now. He is a 5-time 30-goal scorer. He's had 1 40-goal season, but he comes with a heavy price tag and an injured wing. What do you do with Vladimir Tarasenko?
Yeah, that's interesting, because at first glance, if you're a consistent 30-plus goal scorer, that's $7 million in today's cap. Is it huge? Like it's a big number for sure, but we're also talking about a star player and an all-star. Now, the only question is, where is he at health-wise? I think if you're asking me, because he still has 2 years left on his deal, if you ask me, I mean, that would be my main concern. I know the player and that what he's capable of. I've played a lot against him too. He's got one of the best releases in the NHL, especially his wrister. It's insanely good. So it comes down to, how's his wing doing? And by wing, obviously, I mean shoulder. Is he able to play? Is he going to perform on that same level? I don't know. Would I take a chance on him? And furthermore, do I believe a player like that would be good in Ottawa? I don't think there's any point in going after any guy right now like that, because we're in a perfect spot rebuild wise. A lot of the slots are filled. Unless we're vying for a cup this upcoming season, I wouldn't take that chance. So
there's no chance you're paying Vladimir Tarasenko in Ottawa $9.5 million actual dollars. Now, there's probably no question that St. Louis is going to have to eat some money, but I don't see any reason or any which way that Vladimir Tarasenko ends up in Ottawa.
Well, we know he's gonna go now, because once you open the floodgates like that and everything gets public, especially from your agent or from yourself, that's been leaked that you're disgruntled with the team, that's a dark cloud over the team, and it's a huge distraction, especially when it comes to a star player like Vladimir Tarasenko. So again, I've only ever heard unbelievable things about him. I heard he's an unbelievable teammate. He's pretty quiet, just a good guy to have in the room. So again, there's nothing negative really coming from here from my angle, other than I would like to know, if I'm a general manager in the NHL, where his health is at. So that's where the doctors come in. He'll have to go in and pass a physical. But the fact that he's complaining, or that somebody in his camp has been complaining about botched surgeries with regards to the team, that's a pretty big deal. And that's a pretty bold accusation. So again, it creates a very uncomfortable situation for that club and team member. And so I'd like to think at some point here, probably free agency, he'll be gone.
Okay, here's my bone to pick with this whole thing. He has a no trade clause, so he gets to submit 10 teams. Okay, then you can't be in control. You can't pull the
no. Doesn't he have
Wally?
Wally, doesn't he have a full? Doesn't he have a full no move?
So I think he submitted 10 teams that he would go to.
Okay, all right.
And I'm like, all right, you can't go, I want out, and then go, I would like to pick and choose where I get to go, though.
Well,
I have a huge issue with that.
Yeah, I know. I understand that too. And I mean, that's something I probably would never have the cojones to pull off myself. So I couldn't imagine being in that situation. But again, really uncomfortable. I think if you're him, it'll be interesting to see what his 10 teams are. I'm not sure that'll ever be released, of course, but I'm curious, like, coming out of St. Louis now, is he really going to pick and choose, go for a winner? Is he going to just pick a nice spot to land? Doesn't really matter how the team does. That's, to me, going to be a big indicator of where he's at health-wise.
Well, in Jeremy's article, he does say that he wants to go to a contender. So again, you're limiting teams once again. So they're all up against the cap as it is. You can't just.
But that's a bold thing to say, though. Like when you're like, it doesn't carry a whole lot of weight when your agent comes out and goes, yeah, he wants to go play for a winner. Like, that doesn't mean a whole lot. I want to see the physical paper to see exactly which teams he's picked, because you can manipulate the heck out of those teams, right? If you're in control and you can put 10 teams down on a list, you can manipulate it so that certain teams, absolutely have no chance of going after you. So you're going to narrow your teams down to like 3 or 4 teams. That's what we did when we had to pick our 10 teams for the expansion draft.
I know the Islanders are near the top of the list. I don't know if he's a fit there or not. He's got 34 games in the last 2 years, 7 goals. I don't know what the answer is. I'd like to see this get resolved because I'm curious just to see how it plays out. Same with you got, I think Seth Jones is on the move because I know he's at UFA. There's a lot of it seems big names.
There's some good
possibly Jack Eichel.
Yeah, but Seth Jones, like that's another huge name that I haven't heard a ton about yet because I know his numbers are still really good, but he had been declining a little bit according to analytics, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't buy a whole lot of that. I think he's probably just looking for a fresh start because he's, in my opinion, one of the best defensemen in the NHL. So I'm curious to see where Seth Jones goes.
Should be a good offseason. Speaking of offseason, number 4, sensible offseason. What lies ahead for the Senators if we don't think it includes Jack Eichel or Vladimir Tarasenko or Seth Jones?
No chance. No chance.
So they've got, I mean, this is a big month for them. Obviously the draft, the expansion draft, the free agency. Is this a quiet summer? You got Drake Batherson and Brady Tkachuk to get signed here.
Yeah, I think those are the main issues, if you will, as far as teams and what they're planning on doing this offseason, I think, the Sens are going to be relatively quiet. I don't like saying that. I don't see them making a ton of splashes. Maybe go after that top 4 that we were talking about on D, or get your top 2 center somewhere if you can find it and you're willing to pay for it. But for me, signing those 2 guys, that's going to be huge in Batherson and Tkachuk. And of course, who are they going to pick at number 10? Who are we to judge right now at this point? Like, we can speculate, but the Ottawa Senators, quite frankly, have a terrific record here, like over the past few years of picking up good players, top tier players in those first couple rounds. They have an excellent draft record. So for me, it's like right off the top of my head, a player like Mason McTavish, if he's available. I know a lot of people, we're talking about going after a goaltender. I still like a player like Mason only because he's incredibly competitive. And just from experience playing in the NHL, I know those guys are the players that end up playing for your organization for a long time. Those are guys that are hyper competitive. They just want to go out there and win at all costs. So for me, based off of what we've seen off of scouting reports and some clips of how competitive this kid is, I mean, to me, that's a safe pick if he's available at number 10. If not, at this point, I have no idea who a lot of these players are. All I know is that the Ottawa Senators have done a really good job at drafting, so I'm not even going to try to judge their work.
The Mason McTavish thing is interesting to me. I actually hope he's there because he lives out here near me, and he's in Carp. I'm in Stittsville. He's trains with people I know, and I know his dad a bit, and I've heard so many things about Mason McTavish and the way his work ethic is, and it's all his off-ice stuff I've heard about. So, he's grown up with players like Calvin DeHaan who play in the NHL. He's been around that kind of pro atmosphere. I think he's an absolute stud, and I would love to see him in the lineup. And that's just a hope and a prayer of somebody.
And he had exactly. And he had a terrific under 18 too in Texas, right? So like we know that he can play. Like there's no fluke here. We know he's a player. It's just a matter of who he goes to and how they get him developed. So I'm with you, Wally. It's not just a situation where we have a local talent that we should go after. Yeah. He is a legitimate top 10 draft pick, and that's all that really matters at this point.
The one, and maybe you can elaborate on this, being in that environment, is one thing that always people said about him and his coaches and his stuff is he would always shoot pucks after every drill. And so, those annoying kids that would always be shooting pucks, but he couldn't stop shooting, and he's got a great shot. And so if you're on the ice with these guys all the time, you're like, dude, enough.
Oh yeah, you're going to be talking smack about him behind his back all the time. That's just what we do. It's like any line of work, right? When you're in the office long enough, you start realizing there's some people that kind of bother you. They rub you the wrong way. You still respect them. You can still have a good conversation with them, but people have weird habits. And that was like Chris Neal when we played with Nealer, and he always had to be first in line. Nealer, and that's a credit to Nealer, right? He was such a competitive guy, but in practice, he always had to be at the front of the line. And then, I want to say 25% of the time, he was busting the drill up because he wasn't really probably paying attention in line when we were being told what to do. So, those are the things and little quirks that can make you, quite frankly, a really good hockey player, right? Because it's such a it's such a routine oriented sport as far as being a creature of habit and doing these random things. So a little quirk like that Mason McTavish has isn't a slight against him. It's a good thing.
Consistency is also another one. And finally, number 5, we go to the match. The whole Mickelson and Brady versus Deschambault and Rogers. Did you find it that good? I think this was the 4th installment of these.
Yeah, it was fine. It was hard to follow like consistently. I think for me, like most people, I just enjoyed the banter, like between the guys and the players. Like they could all just sit around in a room and have beers, and I'd probably be attracted to that just based off their conversations. Sure. Right. So I wasn't necessarily there for the golf. And I know that it was a little difficult for some people to watch. I think it was on one of those random CNN international channels that not everyone has a subscription for. I saw a lot of people complaining to Bob Weeks on Twitter about that. but no, I mean, it was fun. I mean, I think I'd rather speak on our game, Wally, that we had against Simmer and Ian, maybe, and perhaps the rubber match that's about to happen here over the next week or two. So again, it's a money grab, but it's entertaining. People enjoy it. So I can understand why, the PGA got involved with that and set it up. And here we are.
There is some biting commentary, and Tom Brady is pretty hard going at Aaron Rodgers. And I know I find that Aaron Rodgers is a bit sensitive and stuff. Do you think the golf ball with 7 Super Bowl titles was great shade or a little excessive?
You know what? From something I've known, because I've been following Tom Brady for years now on social media, and I'm a huge fan of his just because I like winners, right? And his attitude, I found, especially since he's gone to Florida, I think Florida's rubbed off on Tom Brady. It's not like, I almost want to say Tom Brady's a Florida man now. He's got a little bit of an arrogance to him. He's a little quirkier, but I'm here for it. I love it. And that's a good example of all those Super Bowl titles in Roman numerals on his ball. It takes up about half the face of the golf ball. But I mean, and to your point with regards to Aaron Rodgers, that's another thing where I didn't realize he seems a little eccentric, right? Like he's a little different. So I can understand now all the talk with regards with the animosity between him and alleged animosity between him and Green Bay and all that. So I can kind of understand now where that stems from based off of his general persona. But again, really good to see, really neat to see players in a natural environment where they can kind of just shoot the shit together and have fun. And I think I like seeing the personality come out. That always sells. And even guys like Charles Barkley with their commentary, I mean, it really works out nicely.
Well, and I guess athletes of all spectrums can relate to it, because when you get out and you're outside your environment and you get just to chirp other guys and just play that banter back and forth, and
it's great,
and especially in a golf game where it's kind of laid back, those are the best moments, right? That's the stuff you live for. It's not a great shot or who cares. It's the how bad did you just burn me on the last hole with that comment?
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome.
All right. Those are the headlines brought to you by BEI, Bonnechere Excavating Inc., helping to shape the Ottawa Valley. Visit BonnechereExcavating.com. And Meth, you mentioned you like winners. Well, we got a winner on the show coming up after the break. We go one-on-one, man-to-man, if you will, with Sens Chief Amateur Scout Trent Mann. That's quenched by Whitewater Distillery, who have launched Paperboat Artisanal Gin. Visit their Instagram page, by the way, Whitewater Distilling Co., and check out their Cocktails and Dreams series, where they serve up some tasty drink ideas. You're watching the Wally Mathot Show, powered by Barrhaven Ford and their all-new Roush-inspired BFC custom vehicles. Visit barrhavenford.com/BFC-customs today. Welcome back to the Wally Mathot Show, powered by Barrhaven Ford. Barrhaven Ford has recently introduced its all-star lineup of custom builds. It's the Barrhaven Ford Customs. Barrhaven Ford has brought Roush-inspired custom F-150s, Rangers, and Mustangs to the nation's capital. At Barrhaven Ford, they build the truck or Mustang the way you want it, customizing each truck or Mustang to fit your individual needs. Go to barrhavenford.com/BFC-customs, or just go see them. 555 Dealership Drive in Barrhaven, just near the Costco. Welcome back to the Whitewater chat room. Pleased to be joined now by the Ottawa Senators Chief Amateur Scout Trent Mann. Trent, all the way back in beautiful New Brunswick, my home province. Nice to see you, my friend.
Nice to see you. Welcome to New Brunswick.
I miss it dearly. You've actually had to spend an awful lot of time there doing this quarantine. Has it changed completely how you've gone about trying to prepare for this draft?
Well, I mean, we've had to be ready to pivot at any time, really, quite honestly, and we're kind of turning over every stone we can possibly turn over to make sure that we have every little bit of information we can acquire. I mean, some players, unfortunately, the most important piece to scouting, we haven't seen them in the rink, which is very difficult, obviously. So it's like going to your tool chest, and the best tool that you have in your tool chest is no longer there. But we've used everything at our disposal to make a good decision here in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm confident in our group. I think their track record speaks for themselves. So I'm confident with our group that we'll make good picks. It's just an unnerving time for them and myself, because there's just some things that we've had to do differently, and it is the same for everyone. Luckily it's the same for everyone, but at the same time, like I said, I think that the staff have done some pretty good work here and put countless hours, and the seasons went on long. One season is drug into the other, and the next one will start the day after the draft. So that's how it is. But we're looking forward to it. 2 weeks time. We're excited.
Let's get it out of the way already. Who are you taking at 10, and then we'll just move on.
So the interview's over then if I tell you who's at 10?
Nobody listens to our show. It's fine.
Well, you know what? Quite 100% honest. We have a lot of debate left to do to get to that point to make sure. In the back of my mind, I know who's in the conversations at least. But as far as who it'll be at 10, it's not quite decided just yet. There's still a few little pieces hanging over us that we're acquiring, and help us be sure that we're making the right decision.
Okay, so every year, and I completely understand that everybody says we're going to take the best player available, not to fill a role, not to fill a need per se. But you drafted 10 players last year. You have a plethora of young talent. Would this ever be the draft you would draft to fill a void?
You know what? I think you have to kind of look at to see who's available at the time.
Sure.
There's just some players that you're just thinking, you know what, we can't pass on that player. They're just too valuable of an asset that could help us in some area. And if you go that route fortunately or unfortunately for Pierre, then he'll have to make a decision on trades or whatnot for later on. But our responsibility is to still look after the Ottawa Senators and their best interests. And while sometimes those conversations do come up that, should we go this route? They do come up, but the reality is that, if the player is just that much better, or we feel the value is just too great, then we have to do that.
So many questions for you. I'm going to try and get through all these. The OHL kids, you talked about not having seen everybody. How much of a disadvantage are they under going into this draft because of them not playing last year?
Well, it's tough for them. I feel bad for them. I do feel bad for them. I feel bad for scouts, especially the Ottawa Senator scouts, because you have to make a decision on those kids. But the reality is that we have reports on players that we potentially get drafted this year, and the last time we saw them in the rink was February of 2019. That's a long time ago. A lot of things can happen. Drake Batherson, when he was a Bantam and first year midget, he was just a tiny little kid, and look at him now. So those are the things that can happen over that window of time. And quite honestly, if we're not allowed to have face-to-face meetings with these, other than via Zoom. But the reality is that a kid could have jumped from a 5'8" kid to a 6-foot kid, or maybe maybe the way they play now, they're at 5'11" and they have they're going to be a real good player, and we don't know that 100% sure except for what they're telling us, right? So we try to confirm heights and weights, but the reality is that there's no one there confirming it for us.
So one of the things I've heard is, and I think Methot and I have debated this previously, and that is, it's not such a big deal about the kids who were projected maybe the first, second round, but it's those kids in the 5th, 6th round that may get left off the draft because you're not really sure about those guys, and you take the ones you are sure about. Is that fair?
Well, it very well could be. I mean, we have to discuss the upside of those players, that we haven't seen as much, and what they could be, and decide, do we roll the dice and go in this direction on what we feel there's potential to be here, or do we go to the other side where we know a little bit more about them, however, still not as much as we normally would know, and have to weigh that out. So those are discussions that are taking place now, and it's not ones that we're familiar with, because usually we have all the angles covered at this point, our staff anyway, because I know our guys work tirelessly to get all that information. So, but now just sometimes it's just not there. There's no information to be had. So, there's been some good debates so far from the guys on different players, and then saying, well, yeah, but what if this guy is able to do this, And it's like, well, yes. So how do we know that? And then well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go check on this, and I'm going to. So, and the guys go back to work, and then and find the information that they can find out. So, interesting process. It's there's a little bit of fun to it, but at the same time, there is a lot of unknown this year for sure.
How many mock drafts have you done?
The interesting part is for the mock drafts on our end, we wait till the end. So we're getting close to doing ours. We'll do multiple. We use multiple lists, any list that we can find. We do our own. We, interesting. I always have a meeting with Tim Patterson and Sean McCauley, and we create these scenarios ahead of time. What could happen, and the scouts don't know about it, of course, and we go through the whole process. Last year we shut the power down, did a mock draft and shut the power down to say that there's no power at the Ottawa, the CTC. Now what are we doing here, guys? And we went through a process of that. So we didn't leave any stone unturned last year. We were well prepared, and and Sean and Tim were extremely helpful with that, of course. It's interesting that they're outside, their ears and their knowledge base does help us kind of better prepare for the draft.
How many kids are in the binder when you open it up of the draft for this year? Like, I guess you would know everybody, obviously, but how many of you really watched in that binder?
Well, I mean, for me, the binder's bigger this year, right? So the list is longer because there's just so many players that, well, what about this kid? What about this kid? And we can't forget about this kid. So to say that I watched every one of them, I can't say that because that'd be lying. But the area scouts do dig in on those, and they'll say, okay, you know what? I like this guy and this guy. We need to check in on them. We got to watch more, and then I take that, and then okay, so us three guys, we're going to watch this player on these dates, and then we decide as a group, well, is this real, or are we putting them in here, or are we moving them down? And we'll work that way and try to make the list manageable, because it could go on and on. A couple of weeks ago, I received this database. Like, obviously, the NHL provides you the database that you have to pull from your picks. If they're on the database, you can't pick them on that day. So they send you kind of like their generic one, and then you have to add. And the one that they send is 700 and some players, and I have to go through our lists and make sure that if there's a name that's not on there, it should be in there. And it's funny because there's some really names that are kind of like household names that haven't made it in there for some reason, for whatever reason. And then we're also adding names that, like this kid's a pretty good player. Like they're not in there either. And then, so you have to go through the whole thing of adding these names. So it's, so just in that alone, there's your, we know that there's definitely more than 715 names to be considered.
So the combine, you don't have a combine this year. So how's that affect, I guess, how you prep for the draft?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've acquired as much medical information as we can. Central Scouting does help with that because they send out information to a certain number of players and their agents for feedback. I take all the information from our scouts, we compile it, and then obviously Jerry Town has to go with his group and check into all those for us and see what he can find out for us and give us a better recommendation of what we're up against. Then there's physical testing that we normally would see at the combine, but we don't have. So there's some things that agents will send, or there's just information we have where I have to get our strength coaches with Shortsy and Jaron and Rob they review that. We have some skating issues that we get Shelly Kettles to review and give her input on those. it's ongoing. Like I said, that's just a few little areas that we use. You try to amalgamate all the information and figure out where they go.
I guess one of my favorite parts about the combine, although I don't get to sit in there, is always hearing about the interviews that teams do with players, and they come up with crazy questions. Do you come up with any crazy ones? You let someone else, and what's your favorite one you've heard?
Sometimes depending on the personality of the player, we'll ask them, what's the craziest thing you've been asked? Because we don't really go there on the crazy thing because it's a short window of time. And I guess, some people may feel you get some information from that, but we really dial in on scenarios and make the player talk about those scenarios and how they deal with those scenarios, or how they respond to those scenarios, or why they did this here, or show them a clip and say, why did you do this? Or what was your thought process here? What did you see? And force them to kind of, let us know, like, are they prepared or not prepared? So we have got some feedback where we've been told that the Ottawa Senators are a difficult interview. I don't know how accurate that is. But some players, some agents have come back and said, there's players that we've picked that thought that we hated them.
You need to lighten up, maybe.
And it's like, no, we don't hate you. We actually were pretty impressed how you handled that. But but it depends, and you can get all kinds that come in, and like some talk, like you can imagine what an interview with Brady Tkachuk was. But there's some that just they struggle to talk, and they struggle to express themselves, and they struggle to come up with anything. Like during the season, they can't recall anything, and I don't know if it's nerves or but so it's all over the place.
So has there been a player that I guess knocked your socks off in the way that they handled the interview, maybe Brady Tkachuk, and has there been others, and you don't have to name them, that you've seen that dropped in the draft basically because of the interview?
Well, it does have impact for sure. Like, Brady was Brady, and everybody kind of can guess what it was like. But who was an excellent interview was Sogard. Sogard threw us off a little bit in our interview because we weren't prepared for it. Typically, European player that that they have good command of the English language are better interviews usually because it's easier for them. We try to keep all that in mind, and obviously his English is very good, and he had played in North America. So, but he made you believe that that he was going to be a starting goalie, and that he knows what's going on. He knows what he has to do, and he knows what he has to get better at. And when we checked, like players loved him, like his teammates loved him, and coaches raved about him, and it forced us to dig in a little bit more based on his interview, and obviously we're glad we did that. And then there are some interviews where players just they just don't show enough to lead you to believe that they're going to be able to help the Ottawa Senators win, and that's the bottom line. There's good players. There's good players in the NHL, but we're looking to pick players that help us win, and that's we just don't want good players. We want players that can help us win.
Does Trent Mann second guess himself a lot? Like, even if you're at the grocery store and you want a green apple or a red apple, you're like, man, which one do I pick?
No, I acquire as much information as I can as quickly as possible, and I just pick. And for me, like I said, I think I'm well prepared for drafts just based on the fact that the staff provide me with every piece of information that I need to make a decision if I need to. And sometimes I don't have to make a decision because it's very, very clear what the decision is. But equally, when I have to, I'm prepared to do so because I have the information from the scouts. And then, quite honestly, and then Pierre's been through the process as well many times over the years as well. So if there's something, I can obviously run it by him and just say, this is what I know, Pierre, this is which way I'm leaning. Based on this, what do you think? And so that's obviously a helpful tool that not every chief amateur scout would have either, right? So
you've got such a great list of prospects that you've drafted. This is going to be tough. It's like your children. Is there a favorite pick that you have?
Well, well, you know what? I have a soft spot for the Drake Bathurst one. and for a couple of reasons. One is it was the first draft that I was in charge of. Secondly, it's a 4th round pick. And thirdly, he was a kid that went through the draft already. So, and I guess, and then more importantly, he's an awesome guy. And I guess I throw out, he's also a Maritimer. So that
just thinking that.
That's kind of at the, but it is, but when you put all those things together, it's a pretty special pick because, he's turned out to be, a pretty good player, and will be a good player. And, so we're proud of that. I guess just based on those pieces of, information, but the reality is that, I go back and I ask staff all the time about this, and it doesn't matter whether it's American League staff or if it's a strength coaches or if it's, any area of the organization. It could be John and Ian Cox. Just want to ask them about these players afterwards because it's valuable information for us moving forward. I think it can help us make better decisions moving forward. Just to get feedback from them about these guys and who they are and what they're like to deal with and. But so there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of good ones, but
sure.
But that one there, I guess just stands out right away. But equally, a kid like Parker Kelly, wasn't even drafted, but we really want him at camp, and I remember having a conversation with Randy Lee at the time, just saying, Randy, listen, the staff. We feel strongly about this guy. He's going to go in the 3rd round if he goes back in the draft. That's what's going to happen. So luckily, then Randy went to Pierre, and we were able to come to an agreement with his agent, which was very good. And you know what? I think he's a guy that's going to play in the NHL. And at some point he's going to play. When and where it is. I mean, I don't know that part. That's
sure.
That's beyond me. But those are good stories. Those are good stories as well.
I got a couple others to ask you, but I'm not going to go through your entire draft class. Is Igor Sokolov is a huge friend of the show. We like to have him on as much as possible. He's a guy that went into 2 drafts, if I'm not mistaken, and got passed over. So what is it that you liked about him? And were you at all surprised of how good a season he had leading Belleville in goal scoring?
Well, I mean, surprised in the fact that I guess I thought it would take just a little bit longer for him to adjust. And honestly, watching the first couple of games, I thought, geez, you know what? It's going to take a little bit of time here. So the little time that it took him to adjust was the most surprising part. Not that he can score, because I was confident he's going to score. Because he can score. I mean, that's what he does, and I think he's going to do it at any level. So that part, I guess that would be the most surprising part. But he's I kind of dug in on him a little bit more as far as information, late, just a couple of months prior to the draft, and I had just had an interview with him, and I had Jeremy Benoit. I said, Jeremy, you're gonna if we pick this kid, he's going to be on your team next year in Belleville. Take a look. Take a look at this kid here. And then the agent was sending little clips. He says, look what he's doing in the gym. And I said, well, I'm not allowed to ask you. He says, I know, but I'm sending it to you. Take a look at this. And I said, okay, well, I'll take a look at it. And then you meet the kid, and you just dig in a little bit more, and you find more information. And then, we're sitting in the 2nd round, and you're thinking, I'm looking at the names. I think this kid here can score. Why not do this right now? This is the time. And staff are on board with it, and the rest is history, I guess. But I'm sure you get the same feeling. There's not much that's going to stop this kid from scoring in NHL level. Barring some, God forbid, some bad injury, but he just. He's contagious, right? Just contagious. And
we look forward to seeing him. We hope he cracks the lineup here soon. And to complete as a fan, but we still would love to see him in the lineup. Heated discussions or arguments that you've had in the draft war room, if you will. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, because Craig sat in one of these, is it Shane Pinto? Which draft was it where I think it was the start of the 2nd round and there was lots of debate?
Yeah. Well, there was a number of players in play at the time, and there was some teams looking to move towards the end of the first round, beginning of the second round. So there was a lot of switching, or not. There was a lot of teams looking to just swap up picks, and yeah. So that got pretty heated because there were some other names as well at the time that we were interested in, and staff were interested in. And then LA wanted to, was looking to swap picks at the time too. And anyway, it got to be like it was back and forth. And I remember Pierre said, well, I had this scenario, and then somebody we could have traded this and we could have traded. And so, everybody gets so, they're just invested, like just emotionally on the whole over that time. And it's, and when you look back at it, and you can have a chuckle afterwards, but at the time, like you want the best for the Ottawa Senators. So you just, let's make the best decision here. But of course, yeah, no, it was a debate for sure. And then we kind of listened, like I said, I listened to everyone's information, and Pierre said, well, we can make this, we can swap with LA. And I said, Pierre, listen, our guy, Shane Pinto, let's pick him. Let's just be done with this, and he says, okay, that's what you want to do. Let's do that. And so that's what we end up doing. So those are the ones that you have to kind of make a decision on based on the information you have from all your scouts. And there's a lot more parts that I guess I probably can't repeat because the language is probably not appropriate, but I love it because you know what, like it just allows me to do the best job for the Ottawa Senators if the guys are that passionate about it, right? Like it just so we have some laughs later on with over a couple of cocktails, of course, and different stories come up over time for sure, and that could be one of them.
So is he like one of those guys where you see make his NHL debut and went, I'm glad we did what we did at that time because look at him now? Like, is he a special player for you in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what happens is, like if he's not high on a public list, people will question it. And I get that. I'm okay with that. That's like a fan's prerogative. There's information that we have that the average person doesn't have, and for him, like, when we met with him and we dug in a little bit, like his abilities as an athlete, not just a hockey player, but as an athlete, and his multi-sport seasons, and the fact that hockey was just, he hadn't even kind of scratched the surface on his development. And what we saw at that time, just like, geez, this kid could be real good. Like, and he was so invested in getting better. He wanted as much information he could get a hold of to be better, and so what I mean, we'll see where it goes. But the one thing I do know is that it won't be for lack of effort or lack of investing in himself to be the best player you can be. And you can have conversations with Sean Donovan and Jesse Winchester about him, like it's fun conversation to hear about afterwards, because he's pushing them all the time. He wants more, like, what else can I do here? And why does this guy win faceoffs? And why is that guy better on faceoffs than that guy? And like, those are the little things that make those players, special and have the success that they have. So Shane Pinto, he's another good one as well.
Okay. So one of the things I've learned, and I think it's through Craig, is you kind of have like a scouting mentorship program. And that's probably not what you call it, but about pairing perhaps veteran scouts with younger scouts. Is that something you do? And perhaps can you explain it?
Well, that's, I mean, the beauty about our staff right now is that we have a ton of experience on the older scout, what they bring to the table and their experiences over the time. We have a young group that are coming in that are hungry, that want, that are good scouts, and they bring a skill set that's different to the older scout that brings a different skill set. And when you meld them together, you end up with a pretty healthy staff. I mean, the nice thing is that the younger guy has a ton of respect for what the older guy has done and accomplished, and the older guys are receptive to the younger guys and what they bring to the table that's a little bit different than what they're used to. And that's not always the case, right? I mean, sometimes people are set in their ways and they just want to do it the way they want to do it. That's it. The nice thing about our group is that it's not that way. And, I mean, Don Boyd is 30 some years in the game, has been in management, George Farger's been with the team over 20 some years with the Ottawa Senators. Bob Janicek's been, over 20 some years, with, NHL playing experience from, the Smythe division times. And, like those are different experiences that, like I don't have those experiences, and I rely on those guys, Mikko Ruutu. I mean, the Ruutu family are like hockey royalty in Finland, so work tirelessly, and but all that younger group just kind of, they meld together, and we sit around and we can banter with the best of them, and we always start. That's how we start our meetings. Like, listen, guys, we're here to debate and we're here to argue, but when it's all said and done, we go for a beer together. We're all on the same side. We want the best. I know we want the best, but we have to be respectful. And you know what? The guys don't need the reminder, but it's always a good way to start it off. And I can't say enough about the group that we have.
So draft day would argue, I don't want to call it your Super Bowl. I don't think but it's obviously the day that you plan for every year, right? So now the GM, Pierre Dorian's coming to you going, we're going to trade this pick. Are you like, Pierre, can I just have the pick, please? I already know who we're taking.
Well, I mean, that's, and that's the play. Like, I think it's our responsibility to let them know, okay, you can make that trade, Pierre, but this is what you're giving up. And, and you sure you want, but in all fun, I guess we'd say that. But the reality is, it is our job to let him know what we would be getting. And at the time, he'll have to make a decision, I guess. But it's our job to inform him, right? It's our job to give him the best information we can at the time. And we take that seriously, and we are protective of our picks. There's no doubt. But the group have done a good job. So, it does give them a little bit of credibility when they want to make the pick, of course. But we also know, like, moving forward, we've restocked pretty well, we feel. There's always room for improvement, but the reality is, as we move forward, you can't go to the draft and say, okay, well, we need this in our lineup and just hand pick it and say, well, now we're good. I mean, that, we understand that at some point in time, trades will make their way to the Ottawa Senators, where you're going to have to do, and that's sad for a scout. But it is our job to continue to find the fifth or sixth round guy that will do the same thing, and that happens. And the Sens have done a pretty good job over time with that. So.
The draft tables always have bowls full of snacks. Which one are you grabbing in the bowl? What's your snack at draft day?
Well, I mean, chips are an awful thing to have around because it's tough just to start and to stop. So I try to ask them to kind of keep that stuff down at the other end of the table, because and just keep fill myself up with water and coffee and try to stay away from that. But yeah, that stuff's that's a hard one.
Do you guys just pick up the phone and try to pretend you're making calls just to throw people off?
No, always. You know what? There's one thing. Pierre is always talking to someone just to find out what's happening and what our options are. So I have to say that that's.
Do you guys look around and notice GM's talking over there or someone talking there?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the. There was, I mean, we do it virtually, and we have to because of the world situation, and we'll do it again this year. But looking forward to getting back to the feel of the draft. Like, there's it's like when you go into a hockey dressing room and the smell of the equipment makes you feel like it's hockey time. Well, on the draft floor, there's a odor in the air of hope and transition and all kinds of things that are brewing. You can just feel it. And we're watching Bob McKenzie and Darren Dreger run around and find out their information and who they're talking to, and GM's talking. That's a ton of fun for us, really.
I've been on the draft floor and watched that all transpire, and it is kind of neat because it's just like you don't know what's going to happen. Like all the scouts and all you guys know what you're picking, what you're doing, but well, maybe there's a big deal that's going down here that's going to throw everything off. And we just want that stuff, right? That's what you live for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it becomes harder and harder to do as time goes on, the salary cap and all kinds of other things in play, of course. But it's not easy. It's not easy to move at the draft. I know that for sure. It's there's a lot of work done on things that just don't. They just don't surface in the end, but a lot of work was done in the background to see if you could get to that point. And unfortunately,
has Gary Bettman ever stood up and said, "I got a deal to make," that threw you guys or anybody like for a loop, like who did not see that coming and how it affects perhaps your draft?
I don't know. Maybe the timing, but not necessarily. And it becomes less and less. It's just
it does.
I'm trying to think maybe just off the top of my head, it's one that maybe kind of like, but the crowd does that anyway, so they're always I don't recall right off the top of my head one specifically that happened, but now it's just like I say, it's so few and far between.
And the virtual stuff just takes the whole life out of it almost. Can you guys not say, "I want to thank the city of whatever" before you start? Can everybody just stop doing that? That is my
well, once one team does it, then the other ones are saying, like, how do we not do it, right?
Yeah. Thank the Tampa Bay Lightning for. I'm like, stop. I don't want. Anyway, that's just my pet peeve. So I guess as you build up to draft day, does the expansion draft have an impact? How do you go around the expansion draft, or do you have any idea how to manage through that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it'll be interesting to see how it navigates a little bit now because obviously Vegas has been through it and teams have learned. I think maybe not willing to be so aggressive, maybe at protecting someone, but I mean, it'll have an impact for sure because there'll be some things that are going to swap here as far as picks and potentially the player that gets picked and who's left and and salary cap things will all come into play. So picks will be at a premium, I'm guessing here, and so Pierre will give me a call and he kind of gives me little updates here and there of what could be brewing or what might be happening, and so just so that I'm aware, when we're doing our thing. But at the end of the day, our job is still to make sure we have the best list possible, and he has the information that's available that when we're picking. This is what's available, Pierre, and do we need to make a deal or do we need to move?
The one thing, just on expansion, and I know that's not your wheelhouse, is that you guys are set up really well, though, based on it just appears that most of your guys are protected, that it's not going to have a huge impact. Obviously, you don't want to lose anybody, but that's the rule. So you guys must be pretty comfortable going into the expansion draft. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, and just more from me personally. I mean, you do feel pretty good when you look at the roster and you think, geez, he's protected. Thank God he's protected. And we are in a very, very good spot compared to some. But like I said, we're going to lose one person, one player, that's for sure. And who it is, I mean, we'll see where that tumbles. But the reality is that you're losing someone. So I mean, and sometimes it's just sometimes staying pat is the best. But but it's interesting to see what some teams will do that are having are a little bit not in our situation. Kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, that are having cap issues or have a lot of players in their prime that you can't keep them all. So, and if you do, you might be able to keep them, but there's definitely some side deals going on to make sure that happens. So,
I don't want to keep it much longer. I do want to ask, how is it that Troy Mann is a coach and Trent Mann is a scout?
It's interesting. Troy's always had that coach hunger, and I remember him, even when he was playing, he analyzed the game pretty well, as it was happening, or players, how they played certain ways. He was kind of a student of that. And I remember, his conversations, repeating kind of conversations he had with Bruce Boudreau and then, Barry Trotz. And he's a student of that. Like he loves it. Like he can't get enough of it for sure. And I'm sure his daughter get fed up with it sometimes, probably, I'm sure. From my end, I it's not that I don't enjoy coaching, but, being out there and trying the challenge of looking at some kid that's, just a young kid and try to project what they're going to be 5 to 6 years down the road is a challenge. And, building something is fun, trying to put something together to say that, this is where it started and this is where it ends. And to get to that point is that's for me, that's my fun. Troy likes to pick apart systems, and I like to build and be part of that. So
it is fun. I don't want to keep you. Is when you go through the draft and after you celebrate all the guys you've selected, will you have like a lobster meal? You've been in New Brunswick enough. Have you had lots of lobster? Are you a seafood guy?
Well, my wife, my son don't like seafood, so typically I have to be kind of with my parents to really have a reason to get it. But we grew up on it, so fish and seafood. So we for me personally, I like it all. There's not much that I don't enjoy. You try to stay away from too much lobster, because too much lobster is probably not good for you either. But yeah, it's you kind of look forward to those times where you're with your family, so you have a reason to get it.
The lobster and it is very good. I don't really like lobster, but I do appreciate how people enjoy it on the East Coast. So enjoy all that you can for this summer. I know it's been a hectic summer, and I look forward to seeing how it all plays out in the draft. You don't want to give us the 10th overall pick, right?
Well, I could, but I could be wrong. If I give you the name and then we end up switching things up over the next couple of weeks, well, I'd be called a liar, and then I take away your credibility. So I don't want to put you in that spot. So
fair enough. I wouldn't want you to be wrong. So we'll just have to sit back and wait. But we do look forward to it. Trent Mann, thanks for your time. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you.
Time for On the Points, brought to you by sportsinteraction.com/Wally and Mathot. Sports Interaction is Canada's odds makers. Log on to sportsinteraction.com/Wally and Mathot today to get in on the action. Must be 19 years of age or older. Okay, Matt, they're already still drinking from the cup down in Tampa, and now the odds are already out for next year's Stanley Cup winner. So why not? Let's just pick it.
Sure.
Who do you want, or who do you expect to win the Stanley Cup next season? Now, the odds are Colorado odds-on favorite at plus 518, Vegas, and then Tampa, and then those dastardly Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and this is a tough one. You got to think Tampa's not really going to be in the mix. I can't imagine them winning a third in a row. Again, no. It's entirely possible, but with the cap issues they're about to have, and quite frankly, all this hockey they've been playing, you got to think they'll fizzle a little bit. I'm sure they'll still be a very competitive team, of course. But between Vegas and Colorado, I think those are naturally going to be either one. For me, it's a coin flip between those two picks. And I think naturally you'd have to gravitate towards either of those teams. I like Vegas still at this point, only because I just love the way they're built. They're built to last. They're built for playoff runs. Obviously, a disappointing run here in the end for them this year, but I still like them over Colorado. So I'm going to go with Vegas.
Interesting.
I have no choice. Choice.
Well, I can appreciate that, but I don't like the way they're built, because I don't think they're built down the middle. And that became a huge problem for them in round 3, is they couldn't, when Chandler Stevenson got hurt, they had nothing down the middle. So yeah, I need them to fix the hole down the middle. So I will stick with Colorado. The only issue is Vegas has better goaltending, and goaltending wins you championships.
Yeah. I think they're better. I think they're better on D as well. I'm gonna go as far as saying that
Vegas.
I think Vegas
for sure
they're deeper on D. I think their D core a lot like Montreal, and I think we could agree, right, Wally? Their D and their goaltending is better, and to me, that's usually a key ingredient for a championship.
But in the third round, they couldn't play down the middle. So
they got your number one center. I know Chandler Stevenson doesn't strike a lot of people maybe as a number one center, because he's kind of coming out of the woodwork a little bit as far as his emergence into that higher role on a team. But when you lose a number one center, I mean, it's going to affect your lineup no matter who he is. So yeah, I still agree with you. I don't think they're deep enough, but I mean, that's tough because they've got a lot of money spread out there with that lineup. So I don't know where they go on this one. I think they're going to have to with what they have.
You and I both know, however, that it's likely not going to be one of those two. It's going to be some obscure team that comes out of nowhere.
100%. I agree.
And for me, it's been the Islanders and Florida, and I'm not convinced it's Florida. The Islanders are plus 2,300, which puts them in around 9th.
Yeah.
Who do you think at the bottom? The Rangers are interesting to me. Who do you think at the
Well, what about Toronto? No,
they won the North. No, come on now. They're not even. You and I cannot pick the Toronto Maple Leafs to win the Stanley.
Well, I'm not picking them. I'm just saying it's funny to me that we're not even talking about them yet. Of course they choked, but they still finished first in the division, and they were a legitimate team. I mean, they were overwhelming teams throughout the season. So,
and what's wrong with the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Well, their defense isn't fantastic. They're front loaded up front on that top line. Maybe missing a little bit of depth throughout their lineup, maybe. But it's hard to critique a team that finished first in their respective division. So again,
yes, we can.
And we're going to, of course. I think, and we talked about this before. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but Tavares going down, I think, was a significant blow to that hockey club in the postseason. And then, of course, Foligno comes in and was slotted to play with some of these guys who ended up getting hurt, and things just kind of backfired, and you get that ripple down effect throughout the team. So again, I think you're going to see a highly competitive team again next season. Obviously out of Toronto, I think they're going to be incredibly motivated. But again, show me what you can do in the postseason. Until then, we can't trust them. I find
their goaltending questionable still, and that they don't even have an answer, right? Because Freddie Anderson is not necessarily signed. No. So until that gets resolved, we've said it all along: goaltending and defense wins you championships. So
yeah, and I like the Islanders. You mentioned the Islanders there, Wally, and I think that's another really good sleeper pick. If you want to call them a sleeper pick, they're not sleeping. Everyone knows who they are and how good they are. But again, it's hard to have them in that conversation when you're busy talking about Colorado and Las Vegas. I do think the Islanders are one of those teams that can make a legitimate, have a legitimate shot at it next season.
Sure. All right. So they've also broken down next Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup. You said Toronto's the front runner, Montreal second, Edmonton, Calgary.
Who do they
have? Toronto at plus 125. So Ottawa is last, by the way, which is interesting. Well, at least it is probably to us. So let me throw it to you this way. Can you put in order the top 7 or the Canadian teams for next season? I know I'm going to throw this at you.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. I don't like, I'm looking at teams like Calgary right now and at teams like Vancouver, and I don't see it. I don't see it there. I think Ottawa can leapfrog those two teams easily. If of course they continue their fairly decent play here going into the start of the next year. But again, I mean, as far as favorites go, I think Montreal's going to dip. I really do. I think that they've peaked at the perfect time right now, and that's why you're seeing this perfect storm where they make it into that Stanley Cup final, and obviously they get borderline swept, but they still made it there and they earned that position. But I do think they're going to miss out next year, or at least be very close to missing out, because we've had this conversation with other people, and look at how deep the Atlantic is going to be. It's there's a lot of teams that you have to bypass if you're the Ottawa Senators. I'm rooting for them. I do think they're going to do well. But if we're talking about the Canadian teams right now, I'm looking at Toronto. I'm looking at Ottawa and Edmonton. Winnipeg's in the mix too. But Toronto for sure will be that number one team. But that's assuming that it's structured that way. Do we even know how the league is going to be structured next season yet?
No, but we expect it to go back to the regular.
Exactly. But I mean, so the Canadian teams are going to be split. But I do think that a team like Ottawa has a legitimate chance at making that playoff spot if they can find their way early on, unlike last season. And then, of course, it all depends on how teams like Montreal does. How is Toronto going to look? We know they're going to be a power horse again. It's just a fact. So for me, if you're an Ottawa Senators fan, you're in a good position. You don't have to panic. Let the team grow. They'll be okay. They may not make the postseason next year, but they're on the right path. Okay,
let me throw this at you, and that is the way Montreal finished, and now with Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, young talent coming. Could Montreal be the best team in Canada next year?
They could be, and you'd think based off of the way they finished that they will. But again, I'm just concerned with some of these old guys that they have.
Yeah, Stahl, Gallagher,
like steam.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Corey Perry's still there. Like, is Paris got another year? I don't even know if he's got another year there, but those are guys that I'm looking at right now. Yeah. And then, of course, on defense, players like Shea Weber, Edmondson, how banged up are they? Can they handle, like, how are they going to start next year? Those are all things. Carey Price, is he going to be good at the start of next season? Those are all question marks that I think if you're the Montreal Canadiens, you're going to be a little concerned about. But again, we can only make predictions at this point. It's really hard to say where they stand. I'd like to know how healthy that team is right now. How many guys that going in the offseason are going to need surgery? As we know, teams that go on these long stretches technically go into the offseason with at least a couple players that have long-term issues. So it all comes down to health for me. And again, that's an older team. I think they're going to come out pretty good next year. Long-term, I don't know that they're going to be that effective in the postseason.
Okay, interesting to keep an eye on. Those are the picks. Now make yours at sportsinteraction.com/Wally and Mathot. Sports Interaction, providing competitive odds on all sports. They have over 100 different sports that you can bet on. All right. Now, I've been waiting all show for this, and it seems fitting that it's presented by Faces Magazine, who just released their latest edition. That's with Nick Paul on the cover. Check it out. Lots of great articles. I just can't wait to see your face here. We need to bring in Craig so we can get this all captured here properly. And that is Craig. Welcome to the show. It appears that perhaps Craig, first of all, may be the smartest one of all of us, as he correctly predicted the Cup final.
Yeah, nailed it. I think that I was quick to realize that the same team that we were all picking against those previous 3 rounds, they showed up for the Stanley Cup final. So we kind of figured out that maybe that Montreal team, they kind of ran out of gas there. So that's what I was betting on. I long suspected that they weren't very good. They had a good team, right? They had a good team chemistry. They had a big defense. They slowed the game way down. And I think you try and do that for 4 rounds, unless you have the gas in the tank to do it, it doesn't work. So I think that they just, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say I'm smart, right? Like I think I picked the odds on favorite, most likely thing to happen, and it did. So, but yeah, maybe that's part of the genius, I guess.
C-Dog and picked him in 5. So good for you.
You had them in 6 though, right? I think so. Yeah. You were pretty, I mean, again, you got them right. And then Mark went with his heart.
Yeah. Well, my bracket, I had Tampa winning the Cup on my bracket, but I gassed that thing after the first round. So
yeah,
so many unknowns happening. So anyway,
the thing about those brackets, right, is you look at it and you're like, by then you didn't probably want to cheer for Tampa, but you'd pick them to win. You're like, you've been following this Montreal team and you've been watching them all year and you've been on and off their bandwagon.
If I'm going to pick, like if I want to pick a team that I'm actually rooting for. So that's kind of why I had to switch it at the end. But yeah, it's all good. I can take my lumps.
Okay, well, I'm going to point on this, and I forgot to bring it up earlier. Are we okay with bars in downtown Ottawa floating Habs flags everywhere?
Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, they would celebrate the Cup final. They had all kinds of Montreal flags.
But what I'm saying is, were there that many though? Is this like a real thing, or was this just a couple pictures floating around? Okay, well. Yeah, I mean that sucks. But I mean, if you don't want to deal with Habs flags downtown, then ice a really good team, which is what they're doing now, and hopefully they can start playing well in Ottawa, and people can kind of forget about the Montreal Canadiens.
All right, I'll just leave it at that.
I'd say those bars, though, they get a bit of a pass, right? Like it's been tough with the pandemic and everything. Yeah. Like if they got to stoop to that level to bring some of those Habs fans in, like okay, I'll allow it.
Desperate times.
I understand that completely, and I support small business. I just found that, like, can we not do a different way? Put up a Canadian flag, not a Montreal Canadiens flag. Okay, I'm just going to, Craig, you just take the next part here, because I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this a little.
Which part here? We did a little bet, though, didn't we? What's happening with this?
Yeah. I'd just like you to remind Meth about the little bet.
I think Meth has to eat a super well done steak, or not super well done, very well done. I think Brent.
Oh Jesus!
And you know what? I'll have a slice too. I don't mind. Brent, if you want to cook us steaks, I think that's kind of your win here. Is you get to feed you were right. Yep. He was wrong. I was right, but I was the most right. But what are you gonna do? So yeah, I'll join, and we'll enjoy some white waters, and we'll enjoy one of those classically cooked Brent Wallace steaks that everybody on t-shirts loves. Do
you want me to season it for you, Matt? Or anything? Like, do you have any requests?
You know what? And I'm being honest with you. A little salt and pepper is fine. And then if I need to add a little lubricant with some steak sauce, no problem.
Okay. I'm actually quite this might be the best part of this whole show that since we've started, I get to cook you this well done steak just to see you try and eat this.
It can't be that bad. As long as it's not like fried to the point where you can't bite into it, I'm okay. It's fine. I'll handle it, and we'll videotape it if we need to or whatever. It's all good. We'll film that.
Okay. We'll hopefully get this done soon. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Craig, let's get on to some trivia, shall we? And see if we can make another bet at some other point.
Yeah. We got some more pizzas to give away. So we got to start by giving some pizzas away, and then we got another opportunity from our good friends at Pizza Forno. Man, they got some pretty good stuff there. People were pretty psyched about that. I saw a few comments, but I don't know. So hopefully we can pop by and grab one at some point. But yeah, Pizza Forno, it's a 24-hour automated pizzeria making tasty artisanal pizzas in 3 minutes. Guaranteed fresh ingredients and never frozen. 2 locations in Ottawa, 33 Clarence Street and 11159 Bank Street. So our first set actually comes from our last one with Wade Redden. And we had just asked, Ottawa's picking 10th overall. You guys touched on that earlier. Who's the last player chosen 10th overall to play 1,000 NHL games? Everybody, well, a few people got it. The answer was Radek Dvorak way back in 1995. So shout out.
By the way, was Wade Redden's draft.
Oh, okay. Look at that. There's the tie-in. And so you know who else knew that was at T Brads with a Z 19. So you scored yourself 5 pizzas from Pizza Forno. You can get them all at once. You can get them one at a time. But you got 5 pizzas coming your way. So keep an eye on your DMs because we're going to slide in there shortly. So, hey, you know what? We got 5 more to give away. Delicious pizzas from our friends at Pizza Forno. So they got 8 different options to choose from as well. I don't know if that was the thing you guys knew about, but so we got to go maybe try one or 2 of them out. But from today's question, so you guys did a great job with Trent Mann, by the way. He's one of my, I love Trent. I got to work with him for years. I got to watch him work his way up from he was a part-time scout, I think, when he started, to now he's chief amateur. So him and his brother, I mean, those guys, I think if you can get excited about the future on the ice, if I was going to get excited about the future off the ice, it'd be those 2 guys. I think
and Wally did a great job. I was unfortunately not able to do that, so you got to give credit to Wally. But yeah, the Sens are incredibly lucky to have those people involved, the Mann brothers, because we look at the imprint they have on the team right now. It's incredible. So it's almost kind of scary because it's a situation where we hopefully won't lose them at any point, because I'm sure the secret is out. But again, you nailed it there, Craig. It's good to be giving them some love right now because they're doing all the work behind the scenes, developing these players, choosing these players. That's huge for an organization. It's your lifeblood when it comes to building a hockey club.
It's pretty cool. They're different guys too. I don't know Troy as much because he was in Belleville, but I got to know him a little bit kind of over the last year or so there. And they're very different guys, the way they act, but they're just perfectly suited for the roles they love. I think that's it. I think that's why they're just as successful as they are. It's they're just perfect for that role.
Yeah. Well said.
And anyway, something that Brett asked him was kind of maybe who was he most excited, or I think you said favorite, but who's a pick that he liked long term? And that's today's question. So which player did Trent Mann rave about drafting? So if you caught that in our interview with Trent earlier, send us your answer on Twitter using the hashtag Wally and Mathot, and be sure to tag at the Pizza Forno. And we're going to reveal the show on winner on Monday's show. Brent, you want to talk about Monday's show? I'm pretty excited.
Well, if there is no breaking news, Elliot Friedman will join us, and he promises he won't get a haircut till after being on our show. So I look forward to having him on. We just spoke yesterday, so he said he's excited. We'll get to talk to him. Of course, the expansion list is coming out, so we'll do expansion stuff on Monday. And I do want to say I appreciate, and I probably shouldn't even bring it up, the fact that neither one of you reminded me about hitting myself in the face with my own golf club the other day and buckling my leg.
I didn't even think of that. I thought, Wally, for sure that this was a situation where you got in a scrap at some dive bar around the corner from your house, and that was your way of covering it up. That thought, I'm not kidding. That thought crossed my mind. I'm for sure he got in some scrap, ran his mouth, and some guy punched him in the head. But apparently you managed to hit yourself with a golf club. How the heck does that even happen?
So, I'm almost embarrassed. So we're playing with my son, and we're playing at Edgewood Links, and he's been a bit pouty for a couple of holes. He's 14, but he wasn't hitting the ball well. And I'm kind of annoyed. I'm we're not here on tour. Just play the game. If you hit another ball, hit another ball. Anyway, I just parred the hole, and I went to pick up, I had my putter in my hand, and I picked up my wedge at the same time. And you know what, you try to fling it back just to let it slide down. Well, it kept coming, and it just clubbed me like a baby seal. So I split me, and then I had that reaction okay, cool. And then I just buckled. And it's Oh my God. I 23 years in television. I never had a mark on my face except one little time. And now I'm not. And I club myself. Anyway.
I think that's what makes me, I think that's what gives me the satisfaction, is that I know how much pride you take in that perfectly manicured face of yours. So knowing that you've got a little nick there, although I can sympathize, because it hurts. Like those clubs, that's got some weight to it. It's like taking a stick to the face. It never gets old. The novelty never wears off. It always hurts. It hurts equally every time. So
like it
at
was
least
a
you didn't get
pressure.
stitches.
I thought I might need one. Like, the pressure builds and it splits. Like that's, oh my good Lord. Yeah. I'm sure I got a concussion.
Thank God that didn't happen during your match with Ian and Simmer.
Oh, I would have
you would have never lived that down either.
And my kid's like, he doesn't know what to think. And then he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not all right."
Was it leaking a little bit?
A little bit. Like I'm shocked there wasn't more blood, because I look at it and I got it on my hand. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be bleeding all the rest of the day. Anyway, it stopped. So
nice. You could be like, you could be a tough guy, Wally. I know a lot of the tough guys that I played with in my career. It takes it just takes a certain type of person to not ever cut open. Like I played with some guys that had like leather skin. John Morasti was one. Brandon Sugden, another guy. Who in Ottawa? Chris Neal.
Nealer's a hard guy to make bleed.
Like, he had the odd cut here and there, but from fighting and stuff, like it's like they just never marked up. It was bizarre. And then I could get hit in the face with this crayon or pencil and I'll probably get a cut, right? So just depends on the body type. So Wally, that's a line of work. There's a UFC event happening in a couple of days here. Conor McGregor's fighting. Maybe you can show up on the undercard.
Okay, did you see this press conference? I meant to bring this up with Kucherov. I would rather take the Kucherov presser over this UFC presser any day, where they walk out and pretend they're going to fight each other and how tough they are. Yeah. Just sit down.
Well, you know what? There are times where you can believe the hype a little bit because it looks genuine. I think this was the first time, for me at least, watching Conor McGregor, that I felt like, because I watch a lot of fighting, this was the first time I felt that was like, it was so obviously fabricated. It didn't feel genuine. First time. It was very theatrical. It was very dramatic. And really, Poirier doesn't have the type of the guy that Conor McGregor fighting, by the way, for those listening, is Dustin Poirier. They fought twice already. Conor McGregor won the first meeting. Dustin Poirier won the second. They're fighting on the trilogy now. On Saturday.
What's it called, Matt? The third fight here? What's the
rubber
third
match?
Hey, you got
it's the rubber match. So they've got this big rubber match on Saturday. Anyway, and yeah, they had a little presser yesterday, and it was a little over the top. I think that they always are. But he doesn't need to be doing that anymore, because he's going to sell. Like, people are already buying this fight, whether he's dramatic at the presser or not, right? So I'm agreeing with Wally. I thought it was a little too over the top. The weigh-in will be tonight, I think. So that'll be interesting to see if some more shenanigans happen there. But otherwise, I mean, who cares? It's just, I think I'm going to watch it. I actually think this will be the first event that I'll stay up past 10 o'clock for.
It's interesting to kind of stack it up, though, because I don't know if you guys been watching, probably not, the NBA playoffs. Like, they're in the championships now. Like, it's kind of neat to match up. Like, okay, look at the NHL, right? It was this big travesty over Kucherov and him being real, and then you get the NBA where these dudes are showing up, like Devin Booker's showing up in like classic cars, and like
I've been seeing that. Yeah, those wheels that he's rolling in are sick. But no one had the Bucks and Suns making the finals, right? That's the thing. It's like all the injuries, and that's what I think killed the NBA a little bit. I don't know what the ratings have been like. I'm sure it's a disaster right now. You've got Milwaukee in the final. But I just think, for me at least, as a fan, once you lose all those marquee players, and of course there are marquee players on these two clubs, but I'm talking about like those real big names. I just lost interest right now as a casual, and I haven't really been following it all. So I think that's been a bit of a hit on the NBA. But I agree with you, Craig. It's fun to see the guys rolling in their cars and different fits and stuff like that. It's always a lot of fun.
It'll be interesting to kind of see what happens, because you're not wrong. Like, Suns and the Bucks, right? Like, those aren't big markets in the NBA, but they seem to be marketing their stars better. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, like, yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you there. Absolutely.
Maybe it's the smaller roster sizes or whatever, but like guys like Devin Booker, and that definitely helps.
Well, and it's not just that. I think people forget, like, you can't compare the two sports. You can't. Yeah. We're talking about a ball sport, right? Any kid, it doesn't matter socioeconomically what group you're in, anybody can play, right? Which is great. That's great for the sport. It's a lot like soccer. So, people are like, well, how do we improve, the viewership in hockey? Well, you just can't. It's like, it's a very tough thing to do. You know, you can market it really well. They hired that TikTok guy and whatever, but at the end of the day, it's accessibility to the sport. Anybody can pick up a ball, go down the street at any given point and shoot some hoops. You can't just pick up a stick puck. No, Wally, okay. How do we make
I don't argue that point.
Why can't you buy me a horse so I can go play polo with a bunch of people? Because it's expensive.
I know.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
You have a horse, don't you?
No, I've got 25 of them, but I don't technically own them, though. It's a horse rescue on a property. But that's another story. Listen, Wally, I know you're going to have some fancy wording here, but come on, man. How do you compare?
No. I don't argue that point whatsoever, right? The cost of hockey is astronomical. That's not – you talk about marketing the sport, though. Like, the NHL doesn't market its stars properly because it doesn't want them to be front and center. Like, Austin Matthews is going out a bit. There's a few guys. Remember Jonathan Marchessault would show up to the playoffs in the Lamborghini in Vegas? Like, that was exciting because that's what we saw, but we don't ever see that stuff.
They showed it. Yeah, but because it doesn't happen as frequently as it does in the NBA, right? But you make a good point.
There's tons of guys with style, like David Pasternak and all these guys. There are lots of guys with style and attitude and like to be front and center, but we don't as a league show them.
It's not not just that. The league, I think the league. Okay, culturally, there's a thing too in hockey where you're a little more reserved, maybe. But forgetting about that, look at all the major news outlets like Bleacher Report, ESPN, SportsCenter in the U.S. They're the ones covering and giving love to all these NBA guys because they get the viewership and they know that it's going to get the clicks. Those big outlets are the ones that you need covering your sport. And right now, they're just not doing it a lot. Like if Marchessault walks in a fancy suit in a Lambo, you know that ESPN's not going to put it on their Instagram page. It's just not going to happen. But
not yet.
If you follow Bleacher Report or any of these other big sports outlets accounts, they're always flooding their pages with NBA content because people want it.
Right. So the NHL is so small in the US that if you go to ESPN's website, I think it's a click down on more sports if you're looking for NHL.
Exactly.
So the problem is it's the league needs to, like I've covered Daytona 500s and NASCAR events who are much bigger on scale compared to the NHL. It would blow your mind of just how small the NHL is, right?
Well,
so the NHL needs to sell itself better. It needs to do a better job of promoting its own stars.
Okay. But we all agree. I'm agreeing with you on that, Wally. I have no argument. Of course, they need to promote themselves better. I think what you saw the other night with Kucherov is a good example of something that you need. Whether people like to admit that or not, that's another conversation. But we need this stuff. You need storylines. You need personality. You need the NHL to encourage that. So again, guys like PK Subban, they do a great job on social media at building their own brand. And in turn, when you build your own brand, it's good for the league as well because it draws more eyeballs, right? So
everybody knows
we can agree on all that.
So, but the problem with your stars like Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby are
they're
quiet
very reserved people. Yes.
Right. And again,
but you know what?
Help.
Wally, to that point though, and this is something that I learned over the years when I played, I never wanted to, and I'm not comparing myself to the stars. There's no way I'm doing that. But my point is, I never threw myself out there, especially during a season, because the season is such a grind and you don't want to create a distraction for your team. That was always my thought process, was like, I'm doing this really cool, fun thing today. I'm test driving a Ferrari in Florida or something. I never wanted to post any of that stuff because I didn't want people to think that I wasn't focused on my craft or that I was distracted because I was worried I'd have a bad game the next night after posting something like that. That's how scared I was to post too much. So I can understand to a degree why players do what they do. It's just a different game and the mindset's a little different and it needs to change, Wally. I agree with you.
Yeah.
There needs to be changes. Craig touched on it as well. I don't know how you do it, but you need to have this huge campaign where you just market the crap out of all your young stars that are currently in the league now, because those are the ones that are prevalent on social media. And you got to figure out a way to reach out to those big outlets so that they can start promoting it too. But I don't know how you do that.
So let me throw this. Why is it okay that for the NBA then to market its stars and there's not a distraction around it?
Well, they don't. Yeah. I think over the years, and that comes from the players, and you're starting to see it at the NHL level too, where players come to the rink dressed up however they want. They're showing their own personality. They have their own touch on their clothing. I love it. I'm a huge fan of the NBA. Every year I watch it. I'm drawn to it because they do such a good job promoting it. And they've got the star power that back it too. That's something we can't forget. You've got all these influential people, actors, musicians, whatever, they're all huge fans too. And they're posting themselves going to games. They're talking about it. They're fans of the players. They interact with the players. Those are all little things that I don't think the NHL can compete with.
I just think they've got to find a way to push through those barriers of being reserved, being quiet, to let people in to see these guys. They are great people for the most part. I enjoyed covering all NHL players. Let's find out what they're actually like. People have no idea. Like, you're a metalhead. People have no idea. Now they can relate to that, and you hear all people talking about it. And John Cooper was wearing like a metal band T-shirt, I think, the other day at a press conference, right? Like, he's a big metal guy. You guys can relate to that and have conversations outside of hockey, and know and people can come in and know that, you know what, we have the same interests. That's a huge thing. So
this sounds like a job for content, is what I think. I think the NHL a big struggle is the NHL's content. It just doesn't hit the marks the same way.
And Craig, you would know on that. Like when you see their page, and I'm not criticizing their work, I think they just need a bigger division. I think they probably need more people. But based off of your experiences, like, how would you grade the NHL's content exposure?
It's too safe. It's too because they have they have the difficulty of trying to they want to be family friendly, but you're also trying to bring in kind of a more like adult, mature audience, and it just doesn't always land. So I think the problem is they're just not, I mean, hockey players are not, they don't tend to have as much personality as maybe basketball players. I don't know if that's just the I think bringing through the sport. Like, it's publicly. I think they're just as personable, if not more. In fact, I think they're more personable. I think you get better interviews out of players for the most part. They're well-spoken. It's just a matter of getting them out of that comfort zone when they're under the camera, right? And that's an issue that they have right now. I don't know how they fix it. I think with the NBA too, like, one player can win you again. You know what I mean? You have your stars, right? Like, those guys.
Exactly.
And so, whereas in the NHL, it's a team game, right? Like, you can't have a me first attitude in the NHL. Like, you can have it like Kobe Bryant wanted the ball and he wanted to shoot every play. Like, so, I mean, you can have that in the NBA. If you do that in the NHL, you brand it selfish.
And that's why
it's just a little different, right? So it's harder
Exactly. And that's why I don't like comparing the two sports, because they are incredibly different. And you nailed it right there. It's a much more individual sport. So you have a marquee guy or two on each team that is just heavily promoted all the time, right? They're on all the billboards, they're everywhere. You don't really get that at the NHL level. It's a little different.
Yeah. The interesting thing to watch will be over the next couple of years is both leagues are kind of going through like a refreshing of their stars. Like, you're seeing that in the NBA. Like, LeBron's kid is almost old enough to play in the NBA now. Like, he's old,
which is wild.
Now he's still amazing and everything, but you're starting to see these new stars come in both sports. And even you have Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon, and you have all these like amazing guys just kind of hitting their prime now in the NHL. And you have that in the NBA as well. And it's just like, those guys, they're just marketed differently. So, I mean, it's
agreed.
I think a big success, and I mean, this is kind of hopefully the secret sauce for us too, is like, players talk different around other players, right? Like, whenever we tried to do fun content stuff, it was like, get more than one guy in a room and they start acting like themselves. So I think that's a big, and maybe that like the Ryan Kessler thing that Sportsnet was doing, like that, and Kevin Bieksa doing that, like, seeing more of those guys that have personalities now dipping on the media side. My dear friend Mark Mathot, for example, as well. Like, you guys are the guys that are going to drag the personality out of these players. You're the ones that the kids will feel safer talking to you because you're a veteran, right? Like, you're a guy that's done it. They don't feel like they have to send. So I think that's going to be one of the things. I mean, look at TNT, right? Like, they're trying to replicate the NBA stuff for the NHL now. Like, they're just bringing in a bunch of personalities and former players that can hopefully drag some new personality into
hopefully that's hard. That's a tall task, because that TNT panel, that's the bar, right? Like, that's the
that NBA one is unreal.
That NBA panel, like, you don't even have to be a basketball fan. Wally, I know you can agree with this. It's just,
it's entertaining.
Like, you're just drawn to it. And half the time they're not even really talking about any specific play going on in the game. It's just generic fun stuff, and they have fun. That's the key.
I will say, in Canada, the CFL on TSN had that great panel when they had Jock Limey and Chris Schultz and stuff. Like, that was another panel.
They're lively.
Yeah,
they were flags around, and I agree. Totally just adding something and a little better entertainment to it. Yeah, I don't like you can break down plays all day, but like, make bets, make someone eat a well-done steak. Let's go. Like, that's kind of the fun stuff.
It basically comes down to, we need more Freddie Kleisen in our lives. That's what it is.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed.
That's our show for today. If you want to order shirts, mugs, go to wallymethot.com and check out our website. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Meth, I will get the steaks prepared and ready for you to chow down on. We will see you live on Monday. at noon. Have a great weekend, everybody.